Welcome to this explainer. Right out of the gate today, we're diving into a really pivotal moment from an ancient, epic narrative. The whole thing kicks off with King Janamejaya asking a wise sage to explain the extraordinary origins of the Pandavas. You know, these illustrious beings said to literally have the prowess of gods. But to actually understand their glorious achievements, we have to rewind. We have to start with a deeply tragic incident involving their father, King Pandu. And trust me, it's a story that absolutely challenges everything we think we know about right, wrong, and the heavy consequences of our actions.
Which brings us straight to the deep moral dilemma at the heart of today's text. When exactly does a king's lawful right cross the line into an unforgivable sin? I want you to keep this question in the back of your mind as we look at what happens when the laws of men, the duties of royalty, crash headfirst into the universal laws of nature and karma. So let's get into it.
Part 1. The Fateful Royal Hunt.
Okay, picture this. We're in the wild, teeming woods on the southern slopes of the Himavat. The forest is incredibly dense, treacherous, but also just stunningly beautiful. And King Pandu is roaming through these woods completely in his element as a royal hunter. Suddenly, through the trees, he spots his target, a massive, magnificent deer serving his mate, clearly the leader of the herd. What happens next is sudden. It's violent. Without even a second of hesitation, the monarch draws his bow and releases 5 swift arrows, winged with golden feathers. They strike true, instantly piercing both the majestic deer and his mate. In just a matter of seconds, the king has exercised his deadly royal prerogative. But the hunt is about to take a terrifying turn.
Part 2. A Shocking Discovery.
So the king expects to just walk up to his quarry, right? But instead, there's a chilling twist. The deer falls to the ground, but it starts uttering the cries of a man, weeping bitterly. Pandu hasn't just shot an animal. He's actually struck down a rishi's son, a highly revered sage with immense spiritual power, or ascetic merit, who was simply enjoying the company of his mate while in disguise.
In this realization, it immediately sparks this profound, almost Socratic moral debate right there on the blood-stained forest floor. The dying sage looks up in agonizing pain and hits the king with a crushing accusation. He says, "O king, even men that are slaves to lust and wrath, and void of reason, and ever sinful, never commit such a cruel act as this." The sage is basically asking how a virtuous king of the Bharata race could just completely abandon his reason to passion and wrath.
Part 3. The king's defense. Now, Pandu doesn't just back down. He firmly believes he's acting well within the bounds of his legal duty. First off, he argues that kings behave in slaying deer exactly as they do in slaying foes, whether openly or covertly. To him, it's just the established practice of royalty. Plus, he brings up historical precedent. He cites the ancient Rishi Agastya, who chased deer and dedicated them to the gods for grand sacrifices, literally using deer fat for sacred homa fire rituals. So, Pandu's stance is, since men use all sorts of effective means to hunt, careful or careless, he hasn't committed a crime. He's just following the law of kings.
Part 4. A Matter of Timing. This right here brilliantly illustrates the disconnect between the two of them. Pandu is laser-focused on the act itself, the royal right to slay enemies and animals by whatever effective means necessary. But the sage, he completely reframes the whole argument. He tells Pandu, "I didn't blame you for killing a deer. The crime wasn't the hunt, it was the timing." The sage points out the utter cruelty of attacking unoffending creatures who are highly vulnerable and engaged in intimacy. He argues that this time of connection is universally agreeable and productive of good to all creatures. By striking then, Pandu didn't just hunt. He destroyed a sacred moment of universal harmony.
And the dying sage uses incredibly strong language here. He defines the king's transgression as deserving of universal execration. What does that actually mean? It means the act is so infamous, so incredibly cruel, that it literally throws the 3 pillars of life to the winds: religion, profit, and pleasure. Because Pandu chose to kill vulnerable, peaceful creatures offering no offense, the sage declares this act will absolutely, certainly lead to hell.
Part 5. The Fatal Curse.
At this point, the sage finally reveals his true identity. He's Muni Kindama, a peaceful ascetic with great merit, living simply on fruits and roots. Why the deer disguise? Well, purely out of modesty, because his feelings wouldn't permit him to indulge in intimacy within human society. Now, Kindama does note a crucial technicality. Because Pandu slew him without knowing he was a Brahmana, a member of the sacred priestly class, he spared the ultimate cosmic sin of knowingly murdering a priest. But because Pandu was so exceptionally cruel to a couple in a moment of vulnerability, a devastating punishment still has to happen. So let's break down the mechanics of Kindama's doom, because it is highly specific and designed to perfectly mirror the exact state in which the sage was murdered. Step 1. If Pandua ever approaches his wife lustfully. Step 2. If he unites with her in intimacy, just as Kindama did. Step 3. In that exact state, death will overtake him instantly, transporting him straight to the spirit world. And finally, Step 4. The wife he unites with must follow him to the domains of the dead. It's a curse that permanently locks King Pandu out of physical love and, crucially, the traditional ability to father an heir.
And to seal this horrifying fate, Kindama delivers this final, just unforgettable line. "Thou hast brought me grief when I was happy. So shall grief come to thee when thou art in happiness." It is the ultimate chilling principle of karmic retribution. With those words, the sage passes away. And King Pandu, who just moments before was this proud, victorious hunter, is plunged into unimaginable woe. Which leaves us with a massive cliffhanger for this explainer. How on earth will a king, now cursed to die the literal moment he seeks physical intimacy to produce an heir, somehow forge the legacy of the illustrious, godlike Pandavas? The moral debate in the forest is over, but the consequences of those 5 golden-feathered arrows, they're going to echo through the rest of history. So, what do you think of Pandu's justification versus the sage's curse? Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope this leaves you wanting to dive back into the source text to discover exactly what happens next.